Lactate, ambrosia, food of the gods. Well, okay, maybe not quite, but lactate's got a bad rap. It's long been associated with fatigue, tiredness, and while that's not entirely invalid, it's actually an important fuel for slow twitch muscle fibres and therefore for endurance events. Muscle fibres basically fall into two types. You've got slow twitch and fast twitch. Slow twitch type 1 are, as I said, associated with endurance activities, and they use lactate and fat as fuel. Now, fast twitch muscle fibres, type 2, they're used for high intensity activities, things like a sprint up to about 400 meters, and also for very intense activities like a power lift, weightlifting. Now, conveniently they produce lactate as a byproduct of glycolysis. Now, that's good because the two muscle fibres are mixed in the same muscle groups, so lactate can go directly from the fast twitch fibres into the slow twitch fibres. Now, there are two types of fast twitch fibres. It's not that important for our purposes, but type 2A, type 2B. Type 2A used for slightly longer events like sprints, and type 2B for very short efforts, powerlifting. We can plot a graph of lactate in the bloodstream. So the actual lactate transfer occurs within the muscles, but there's always a certain amount of lactate present in the bloodstream. Now, if we do this, when we start to exercise, type 1 muscles will start to burn some of the lactate as fuel. So in fact, the lactate level in the bloodstream will drop a bit, so you may have resting a blood lactate level of about 2 millimoles per litre, and that might drop down to 1 millimole a litre as you start to burn some of that fuel. As we start to increase the intensity of the exercise, some of the type 2 muscle fibres get brought into use to help the type 1 muscle fibres, and they'll produce lactates, and there's only a certain amount of lactate, of course, that the type 1, the slow twitch muscle fibres, can use. So you'll start to see a slight rise in lactate in the blood system as the fast twitch muscle fibres start burning carbohydrates and producing lactate. So you get this graph, and as the effort increases, the amount of lactate increases. And what we find is that at some point, so here we have a graph of blood lactate levels and effort, and at some point the blood lactate level rises a noticeable amount above baseline, and typically there's some arguments about what this level actually is, but if you take the baseline as the bottom point of the graph, then it's 0.5 to 1 millimole above that baseline. Or some texts claim that this level is at 2 millimoles, but that's a fairly standard level. It doesn't apply to everyone. More trained athletes, this rise will begin to happen at lower lactate levels. And this is really just an indicator that we're switching over to some extent from the slow twitch muscle fibres, which consume oxygen, towards fast twitch, which are anaerobic. They use an anaerobic process to consume energy. Some of this lactates in the bloodstream gets transported to other organs, and principally to the liver, where it can get turned into glucose, which is another fuel. So it's good stuff, this lactate, at least at certain levels. So anyway, this point when we notice a rise in lactate level, it's lactate turn point 1, and if you're exercising you can often feel this. It's a point where you start to notice that you're breathing a little bit more heavily, so you begin to feel that you're exercising. Below that level, the effort is very, very low. And interestingly, typically if you know your maximum heart rate, this will be at about 80% of your maximum heart rate. Might be a bit less, might be a bit more, depending how trained you are, how fit you are. Above lactate level 1, if we were to continue exercising at a set level and we continue doing that for half an hour, if we plotted the lactate level and our bloodstream, it wouldn't increase, or it wouldn't increase significantly. So it wouldn't go above, it wouldn't increase more than a millimole of lactate. So maybe a very slight rise. And we go on increasing the effort, and we get to a point where this is no longer the case, that the lactate level actually, if we continue the same exercise, the same effort, the lactate level begins to increase exponentially. And at that point, just below that point, is called the max lactate steady state, MLSS. So again, if we continue and we call that point where the system starts to change radically into using fast twitch muscle fibers, the second lactate turn point, or LT2. It's typically around 87% of your maximum heart rate. And this is probably about the level you can exercise for about an hour. So it seems to be similar to functional threshold heart rate, which you'll sometimes hear used. So at this LT2, the body is no longer able to process all the lactate being produced by the fast twitch fibers, and the lactate begins to accumulate in your blood system. It's not that the lactate is a cause of the fatigue, it's an indicator of the fatigue, that you've gone beyond this steady state. So here we're transitioning, if you're trying to lose weight, using majority fat, using majority carbohydrates as fuel. So just above this LT2 line, if you exercise say for half an hour and you plot lactate, it will increase. It will go up a significant amount, and the harder the effort is, the quicker the lactate will accumulate, until eventually you get to a point of exhaustion. So we call this the onset of blood lactate accumulation, this point. Is there anything useful to learn from all of this? Well, if you want to burn fat, you want to train below the LT1 level. However, you've got to do a lot of exercise, kind of thing that bicycle couriers or pro cyclists are doing to actually lose weight. So it's more effective to make some changes to your diet and exercise at this level. Another point is exercising at this level isn't particularly tiring, so you can do a lot of volume. Now, we said that LT1 occurs at around about 80% of max heart rate, and you probably want to be exercising around about 70% of max heart rate to be well into this first zone. You can do a lot of volume. Something that's slightly less intuitive though is that to improve your endurance, obviously you want to exercise at this level in this zone, but also to improve your speed you want to do a significant amount of exercise in this zone. That's because the slow twitch muscle fibers consume lactate produced by the fast twitch muscle fibers. So if you want to keep your lactate levels to an acceptable level, you want to train the slow twitch muscle fibers. That will help the fast twitch muscle fibers, will help lactate clearance from the fast twitch muscle fibers. Now, what you'll find is after you've trained for a significant amount of time, the effort, or the heart rate if you prefer, as an analogy for effort, at which the LT1 and LT2 points occur, will be slightly higher. So you'll also find that your lactate levels are actually lower. So your resting lactate level will be lower. Your minimum lactate level, your base lactate level will be lower, which means that you can actually exercise harder for longer. Okay, you've probably heard about a lot about zones, and if you're in something like a Garmin watch, sports watch or sports computer, if you input your maximum heart rate, it will automatically calculate your zones for you. This is a 5-zone model which cyclists quite like, and what you'll find is that zones 1 to 3 in Garmin land for a standard, so for something you've not customized, are up to 80% of max heart rate. Garmin Zone 4 is up to 90% of max heart rate, and Garmin Zone 5 is in the 90 to 100% of max heart rate level. So what that means, you've probably heard a lot about Zone 2 training. If you're training in Zone 2, you're training at about 60 to 70, Garmin Zone, if you're taking that as being Garmin Zone 2, you'll find it's about 60 to 70% of max heart rate, which is quite an easy level of exercise. It won't have a huge amount of benefit. You probably need to be at the top of your Garmin Zone 2 to start getting some real benefit from this training these slow twitch muscle groups. At the same time, if you want to improve your fast twitch muscle fibers, you probably want to be training in Garmin Zone 5, at the bottom of Garmin Zone 5, around 90 to 93% of heart rate max. Now, you may have heard a lot about polarized training, and I won't talk too much about that, but the theory is that you should be doing about 80 to 90% of your training in below LT1 and 10 to 20% above LT2. Now, there's nothing wrong with the zone between LT1 and LT2. This is Garmin Zone 4, if you like. But you'll find that it's very tiring training a lot at that level, and for not a great deal more benefit than training in below LT1. So if you want to do a lot of volume, say you're training, say you're pro, semi-pro, training 20 hours a week, you probably want to be doing about 16 to 17, maybe 18 hours even, in below LT1, so around about 70% of heart rate max. And you want to be doing 2 hours, so maybe 2 workouts a week, in above LT2 and probably in the 90 to 93. So we're talking about fartlek, interval training, 4-minute intervals, sprints, things like that. And you'll be able to actually cope. The 16 to 18 hours of low intensity effort will build endurance, and the high intensity will build speed. Now, if you've only got 4 or 5 hours, let's say 5 hours, you probably want to be doing 4 hours in below LT1 and an hour, so 20% above LT2, and certainly into that 90% area to get any benefit. And that will be less tiring. A lot of cyclists seem to spend a lot of their time in this 80 to 90% heart rate area, churning away, and it's quite tiring. And you'll hear about burnout, and that's often people who've been overtraining in these levels. So that's polarized training for you.